and and he serves on our coalition for our law enforcement sector, our coalition is safe in Northern Michigan. And Corey has been just extremely helpful with all of our projects and regularly attends our meetings. And he's just been a great asset to our coalition. So the next person is Cassandra. It looks like you're introducing Trooper McCarthy.
Okay, so my name is Cassandra Parker. I am with the Livingston County Community Alliance, so down in Livingston County. I have brought Trooper McCarthy on. He helps us. He's my go-to guy with alcohol compliance checks. He knows where all the happenings in Livingston County. He is also through the Michigan State Police through the Brighton Post. So he serves Livingston County and Washtenaw County, I believe. So he does all the most of the compliance checks. I send as many decoys to him as I possibly can. We're constantly on the phone because it's hard to find decoys right now. So yeah, that's how he helps our coalition. I don't have a list of the next.
So the next person is actually Susan Pappel, introducing Chief Jerry Norsch.
Good afternoon. So Chief Jerry Norsch is relatively new to the coalition, and I mostly say that is because he came on in November of 2019. So that was like the start of the pandemic, basically, and shortly after that anyway. So he is married and father of 5 sons. Imagine that. I do know that he has one beautiful granddaughter though, so I'm sure that little one's going to be spoiled. So Chief Norsch has been a police officer for 40 years, and he was officer in our chief of police in Lake Orion. And so Lake Orion was to have him as on their coalition, the North Oakland coalition for quite a few years. And then in 2019, like I said, he came to Holly as chief of police. He seems to always have had a passion for this substance use prevention, and he has worked as he was a past member of the law enforcement liaison for the 52-3 district specialty treatment court for substance abuse. And then he also assisted the Michigan legislature in the development and passage of the Michigan synthetic marijuana legislation. He currently works with the state and federal officials on other drug-related legislation and policy, most particularly with the prescription drugs. We have worked closely with the police department and Chief Norsch on drug take-back days, and as well as worked with the police department on the sticker shock, compliance checks. They're just a great partner to have in our community. And again, I don't have a list.
Okay, yep.
So Nicole, it's to you.
Yes,
all right.
Gotcha. Good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to introduce Barb Subastian. Barb is the Deputy Director in the Enforcement Division of the Michigan Liquor Control Commission. Barb has worked with MLCC for over 35 years, first as an investigator, then as Lansing District Supervisor before her current position. Barb oversees 3 districts in Michigan, Lansing, Grand Rapids, and Escanaba, and is responsible for creating new procedures, training staff, coordinating partnerships with other regulatory agencies, and updating and improving internal processes on an ongoing basis for the division. I know her as a wonderful colleague and a valuable resource, so please welcome Barb Subastian.
Thank you so much, Lisa.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for those introductions. So now we're going to turn to our panel, actually. And we're just going to ask you guys to just, briefly explain your professional role. So what you do in your day-to-day. So you guys can take turns, or if you guys would like to answer.
Okay, I can jump in since everyone is shy.
Thanks, Barb.
I work with the Liquor Control Commission, as Lisa Peoples-Hurst introduced me. Basically, I've been with the commission for a long time, and literally the focus we have is we try and make sure that businesses that have liquor licenses are compliant with the law. It's very important that they don't sell to minors and intoxicated people. Those are some of our priorities. We do enforcement assignments where we do compliance checks. We check businesses without minors for a variety of other violations. We do education, not only for law enforcement, but also licensee groups and governmental agencies. It is important what we do. We know that the police wear many hats and they do this kind of work also, but they don't always have time to address all the alcohol issues. So that's why we're here. We work together with police and with community try to make sure that everybody knows what they're expected to do, that everybody has the resources they need to do them. We have a lot of initiatives to educate licensees. We want them to check IDs. We want them to make diligent inquiries, to train their staff, and to make good decisions when they're selling and serving alcohol. So my role pretty much has been in those areas, directing staff, offering education, and meeting with groups like this to share information. I don't know if you want me to get into law changes now or at a later point.
Why don't you save those for a little bit later, and maybe we'll ask some of the law enforcement. Maybe a better question for you guys is, would you describe your role that you play with your coalition?
So, Corey Hebner. So with our coalitions up north, serving 5 different counties, Nicole gets to see me quite a bit, unfortunately for her, with Safe Kids, and that covers parts of Antrim County as well as Charlevoix and Emmett, because it's wrapped around our ISD. But I also have a coalition group over in Gaylord who is getting better. And the nice thing is I'm actually able to take some of the things that Susan, Nicole are going through and take that over to Ellen's group. And then Sheboygan is trying to get a coalition going. They're just in their infancy. So a lot of that information I'm able to pass along and give to other people so they can try to get their coalitions going. And sometimes we have like health departments and we share personnel, or we share people from hospitals. So it's easier to try to get those coalitions going too. My job with the state police as a community services trooper, sometimes I do the decoys, but most of what we're trying to do is do programming. So my job goes hand in hand with what we're trying to do with the youth coalitions, because now I'm able to go into the high schools, give information or do presentations with our high schoolers. And now they're able to have a little bit of street cred with some of their cohorts in their schools.
Awesome. Thanks, Corey, for sharing. Chief Norsch, it looks like you unmuted.
Sure. So I thoroughly enjoy not only being a police chief for the village of Holly and the community, but my relationship with the coalition. It's a passion. Raising 5 boys, it was a must. But more importantly, I was a founding member of the North Oakland Community Coalition going back to the late 80s. So I've been involved with coalitions for much of my career. And in that process, it has allowed us as a law enforcement agency to work with the coalitions together, not only in the education process through coalition matters, but taking that data back, sharing that with the officers who know their community well and are able to influence the lives of the youth in the community. We have 2 full-time school liaison officers that work in our school district, Holly area schools. They also are very plugged into what's going on with alcohol and drugs in the community. They recognize kids at risk. They work with those families. They then bring that information back either to the district to make them aware or back to other groups that can assist those families. And in my previous role in Lake Orion, when I was chief out there, we started a program about 28 years ago called Kids and Cops. And in that Kids and Cops program, we would take twice a month, Friday nights, and get every elementary school child into a building. The school district gave us a building, and we called our program Healthy Choices, but we would work with elementary school age kids and just have fun. We'd play basketball, floor hockey, board games, do all kinds of cool things, bring in face painters and magicians, and engage the youth and take that opportunity to assist them and give them tools to say no and learn where the hazards are going to be. So it's a multi-pronged approach, and working with Susan and the Holly Area Coalition, we are looking forward to developing those same kind of programs, and we found them to be very, very effective in stopping alcohol and drug trends in the elementary school level.
That's great. Thank you, Chief Norsch. And then Trooper McCarthy.
Yes, ma'am. Yep, I've been with the state police for about 24 or a little over 24 years. I've been at Brighton since 2008. I just recently started working with Cassandra with the alcohol buying or the alcohol decoy program, and we've been running around. I mean, the big problem is trying to get decoys that are willing to come out and help. We have several times where everything's all set up, ready to go, and we just don't have any decoys to come. But we've actually hit 53 so far this year. We would have, like I said, we missed probably, I'd say at least a quarter of them were pretty much, I mean, not no shows, but couldn't get anybody scheduled to come out. So I think we're doing pretty good. I mean, we have a pretty good turnout. It's nice, especially when you see these places where you're like, oh, I pretty much guarantee they're going to sell. And you walk in and they do exactly what they're supposed to do. I'm right in there with them when they go in. I stand, like I'm a shopper right behind them. And when they're going through the whole program, I'm witness to everything that's going on, and it's nice. If they do purchase, I literally take the change right from them. If they don't, I identify myself right away, so they know that, hey, this was my decoy. They know, yes, you guys are successful. You did exactly what you're supposed to. A lot of times I will have a 5, 10, or even I've had almost an hour conversation with them. I've had them where they'll call in the owner of the store, or the owner of the store is there, and they come up. We kind of go over some things that they give them some pointers on things that they can do that maybe might help other employees that they have to make sure that this doesn't happen.
And is that for alcohol and tobacco compliance?
It's alcohol as of now. So.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then Barb, one of the questions that we had for you specifically was, are you involved in any local or statewide groups to help prevent substance use or underage drinking?
You mean as far as community coalition type groups?
Yeah.
I work with the Youth Access to Tobacco Work Group. I've worked with different arms of DHHS before. I was in a childhood and underage drinking coalition. I work with the Office of Highway Safety Planning under State Police on the Impaired Driving Action Team, part of the Governor's Traffic Safety Commission. Sometimes we work with local coalitions directly as well. I've done that periodically, but not on a regular basis. I do meet with an East Lansing group who is comprised of retailers who try to advise their members to have good practices and to adhere to them. We have different staff across the state that participate in some of the local community coalitions, some of our investigators and supervisors. I'm not sure all of the ones that do participate, but they're out there all over the state. So you may recognize some of them already.
Okay, great.
A question to follow up to that. Barb, if some of the local investigators are part of, you said some of the local investigators are part of the coalitions?
Yes, to my knowledge, at least a couple of them are.
Is there a way that others could engage their investigators in the coalitions?
That's possible, sure. If you have particular counties that are looking for one of our people to participate in your coalition, shoot me an email or give me a call, and I'd be happy to see if we can arrange that for you. We probably can't have people engaged in every single community coalition, but it's possible that with the fact that we have people all over the state, that we can have them be involved at least part of the time as an advisory person or maybe as a regular attendee. So we can try to work that out for you.
Thanks.
Thank you. All right, so our next question is more about like how you got involved with your coalition or group, and then what was your motivation for involvement? So I think Chief Norsch, you kind of highlighted on that a little bit. You said you had 5 boys. Did that kind of spark your interest in?
It did, but more importantly, just as a patrol officer in early years of my career, and I'm sure the other law enforcement officers in here will understand that, is when you roll up on a crash scene or you roll up on a scene where alcohol is involved and a youth has lost their life or is severely injured, or some of the violence that came or comes out of youth and alcohol, you realize that it's bad enough when we have 45-year-old kids out there who don't know how to control themselves when they consume alcohol, but it's with the inexperience of a 16-year-old, and how that wrecks not only the society at the moment, but their careers and their lives. And you realize that perhaps they didn't get that education in the home, and a lot of the alcohol abuse began in the home, and they simply witnessed parental behavior and mimicked that behavior in their lives. And too often, kids pick up from just about every stimuli they get that we're an instant gratification society, and the way you resolve stress and tension is what the grown-ups do, and that's grab some alcohol. So seeing that in the lives of youth in our community was kind of the motivation for me to try to get involved and begin to bend that curve and hopefully and ultimately save some lives along the way.
Well, that's great. I know that we really, I mean, Corey, if you want to, answer that, like what your motivation was. I know we really appreciate law enforcement involvement on our coalition, and it's been a major benefit to our community.
Yeah, I will, Nicole, because it's a huge commitment for law enforcement to be involved, but it's necessary because what we have, it's a complete paradigm from what we see in today's society. A lot of our public, especially our youth, don't know law enforcement's role. They don't know what law enforcement truly is all about. And Chief Norsch hit the nail on the head, right? He's got a couple community police officers in his school. The local agencies that I work with up here, they all try to do community policing. Most of the officers, the troopers, the deputies that I know, they coach a sport. They coach multiple sports. They run Boy Scouts. They're all vested and have interest, not just because of their own kids, but because this is a big community up north. And we want to make sure that everybody understands what law enforcement's role is. But we also want to make sure that we have kids that stay safe. And so to be able to do both of those things at the same time really helps bring things together. So the kids that I coach, the kids that I see in classrooms can also see that they can have a substance-free lifestyle. And what they see at home necessarily isn't a great thing. And then you go back to that old saying, right? It does take a village to raise children. So if they see something that's different in a different family, or they're talking about topics like you go into the middle schools, Nicole, and do the alcohol programming, and all those questions and those light bulbs that get raised and answered, and we're able to reach out to kids and explain to them, it doesn't have to be like it is at your house, or your house does a really good job of doing this, and here's more information. It's about just connecting those dots and letting those kids see what it can be like with a substance-free lifestyle.
Great, thanks, Corey. Trooper McCarthy, do you have anything to add to that, or want to describe your motivation for involvement?
I've been involved with the community. I mean, I started my career up in the Thumb, up in Carroll. Had a couple kids up there that caught them drinking. you know, and talked with them. Yes, they ended up going through the court system. And I'm big on community, like instead of giving them like a money fine and like, hey, let's go to juvie, that kind of thing. I mean, sometimes just putting them to a little bit of a work and give like everybody's been saying, kind of show them something else that's you know, that they can do with their life. From there, I transferred down to Detroit and trooped down there for about 9 years before coming out to Brighton. And I've actually had a couple people that have tracked me down. 2 of them that were actually juveniles at the time that I had contact with, tracked me down out here to Brighton. One of them, he had to completely remind me about what happened. And he's like, yeah, you just talked with me. You treated me like, you know, like I had something going on, you know, something bad going on in my life. And he goes, and at the time I didn't see it. And he goes, you just like opened my eyes. And he says, it made me like reevaluate my life. And he goes, and that's why I wanted to find you and thank you. And he goes, because I have other friends that, you know, I still keep in contact with through social media, but you know, he said one of them's in prison right now. And he said 2 of them, he says, they're in and out of trouble all the time. And he says, my one contact with you, he says, that changed me. So, and it was nice having them come to me, you know, like I said, track me down from Wayne County out here to Livingston and be able to say one contact with them that could have, you know, went completely wrong actually was helpful for them, even though they ended up in the court system, but it helped them kind of straighten their life out. So, and then when I started working with Cassandra and seeing these other kids, I mean, I'm talking to them. I mean, when I call them kids, they're 19, 20 years old, but you know, I'm riding around, we're going from one place to the other and just talking with them, kind of getting to know them. And while they're doing this decoy buying, you know, you're influencing these 2 who are hopefully are going to influence a couple more. And then when you're dealing with whoever the seller is, or hopefully the not seller, and talking with them and explaining to them the goods and bads of everything that's going on. So it's nice being able to hopefully help a bigger group than what you're actually having contact with.
Well, we certainly appreciate your guys' help in the prevention world and taking the time out of your day to, you know, attend our meetings and help with all these projects. I'm going to turn it over to another colleague who was helping with planning the coalition. Her name is Randy, and she's going to ask the next set of questions.
All right. Hi, everyone. So I was wondering if you could tell us about coalition programs, events and services that you've been involved in, and which of these do you feel are most successful, or what makes it successful? If one of you just want to.
I'll jump in there. I think anything that we can do in law enforcement was so eloquently said by my colleagues previously, where we have one-on-one interaction with kids in our community. If we can change a pattern and change a direction, we change a life. And for law enforcement, as was said, there's so many hats we've got to wear, but that's probably, when I look back on a 40-year career, I think of the ones that you watch their lives change from an interaction with law enforcement or with a coalition or with that information, and they realize the value of a substance-free life. And then you get to watch them grow up and raise their children. I've had that privilege, and as was said, they've came back into the police department and thanked us and had conversations with us about how it's changed their lives and how they watched it destroy lives around them. So all of the programs where we can work together with our coalition members, with actual kids, and be in the building and changing the optic of who we are in law enforcement and how we are. Our mission isn't just to catch crime and deter crime, but it is to help the community prevent crime and prevent that substance abuse, and every opportunity with the coalition to work with youth. Sometimes it's just the recognitions. We have an annual youth recognition where we work with the schools and other community leaders to find kids who climbed a mountain in their life that year. It may be that they did a great GPA or they did something amazing in their school, but for some kids, the silent kids in the back of the room, that the fact that they graduated was a mountain to themselves. And maybe they were struggling with a lot of mental health and social issues. Identifying those kids and bringing them forward and working with the coalition, that is just a tremendous asset that builds years and years in your community.
Yeah.
If I can just also offer, I've had kids come back to me also, and I think that sometimes, like for every kid that does come back, there's another 10 or more out there that have heard you, and you just don't always know it. And being intentional about some of these messages that all of these officers are talking about, and the kids seeing them in different lights, not just punitive, but that they just really care and that they're reaching out in these different ways, I think is fantastic. And it's so helpful to our communities.
Yeah, Randy, and I think it depends on what you mean as far as what your focus is too. Some of the programs that we're doing, like Sticker Shock, that's fun. You get to interact with kids. Like when we have a safe youth night, it's kind of like a lock-in. But then we have a hidden in plain sight trailer. I love interacting with the parents to be able to teach them what we see as drug trends in our community. And we try to make it localized with what we're seeing on our dope teams currently. So we try to get good current information out there and love that interaction too. Also like what our youth coalition does on social media, which is way above my abilities. I can't speak eloquently to it, but the kids get it. And what they're doing on social media, how they're casting a geo net over the school and hitting them with all this programming, the kids really buy into that. So there's a lot of different things that a lot of different coalitions are doing that are all great. It's just what the focus is, on that question.
Yeah. And what do you find makes it successful?
What I find is when you have somebody behind it that cares. Kids see fake. So if you have somebody, your youth coalition leaders, if you have a couple of people that are not just there because they're voluntold or forced there, genuine feelings come through, and that's what it takes. You have to let people know that you care about them. You got to let them know why you're there. And once you get through that process or let them know that you're there for them, they buy in and it builds your group. We're having, good numbers up here because we have good people like Nicole, like Susan that have been doing this. They get and understand what coalition work is all about. Just like Chief Norsch was talking about. He's been doing this for 40 years. And like he said, he's seeing grandkids now come through. So it takes people like him to be in coalitions, to be involved in coalition work, and to put those pieces in the right spot.
Right. Trooper McCarthy, do you have anything to add to that?
Nope, they actually hit everything right on the head. I mean, the nail right on the head. They actually are more involved with a lot more organizations than what I am here at this post.
All right. Well, thank you. Barb, I actually have a question for you. Are there the recent law changes that coalition leaders should be aware of?
Yes, thank you. I was hoping to mention that anyways. Seems like that's information that all of you typically want to have. As you know, the legislature is always busy making new laws, especially about alcohol, typically allowances for new things that are happening. The newest set of things that changed recently was some changes to mixed spirit drinks or ready to drink cocktails. I don't know if that rings a bell with a lot of you. Seems to be the new hot item out in the market. We've all seen things like, say, Jim Beam and Coke in a can. Those have been around for years, and typically those have been capped at 10% alcohol by volume. They have spirits in them. There are also some drinks out there that are like the Alco Pops, Mike's Hard Lemonade, things like that. Again, low alcohol content that have malt or wine base to them. The law changes that happened recently basically allow mixed spirit drinks to go from 10% up to a maximum of 13.5. So the alcohol went up a little bit. And a lot of these now are going to include spirits where they used to be mostly malt and wine. They have to be in metal cans. The thing that you'll probably see that affects you most is because of the definition of these products, they've been shifted over to stores that sell beer and wine. Doesn't have to be sold by a store that has a spirits takeout license anymore, or for bars and restaurants now, if they're only allowed to sell beer and wine under a tavern license, they can sell these mixed spirit drinks now where they weren't allowed to before. So you're going to be seeing more of these products at more places probably. A lot more out there. They lowered the tax rate on these beverages as well from 48 cents a liter to 30 cents. That's not uncommon in my world that taxes go down instead of up on alcohol. There's also allowances now for the wholesalers to carry these products and to distribute them. There are some new allowances for retailers to ship alcohol to consumers now. Used to be the stores were limited in using their own employees. They can use a common carrier now to deliver beer, wine, and mixed spirit drinks to consumers directly. There's an allowance for out-of-state distillers, people who make spirits, to distribute their products in Michigan if they get a new license that we are offering for out-of-state distillers. Out-of-state distributor license is what it's called. Those are the main big changes that happened. So more places carrying a wider variety of beverages. Don't know if anyone had any questions about those law changes.
I was just asking if you could add sip and stroll, Barb.
Oh, sip and stroll. Yeah, actually that may be pertinent. I don't know if I talked about that at the last coalition. You mean like the cocktails to go and social districts, those things? Two different laws there, a little bit older than the newest things I just mentioned. Basically, the cocktails to go, certain types of retailers can sell those. The products are supposed to be sealed. They don't have to be tamper-proof, but the top can't allow for perforations or straw holes. They're not to be consumed while people are driving home, for real. But bars and manufacturers are allowed to sell those now. So you may be seeing those out and about. There's also a law change that allows for social districts, lots of little restrictions on that. But in long story short, municipalities set up a particular zone or district, and any businesses that have liquor licenses that are immediately adjacent to that area can get a permit that allows them to have customers come to their bar or restaurant. They sell them beverages in designated cups that have the logo of the retailer and the social district. And then the customers can either drink them there at the bar or restaurant, or they can take them into the unlicensed social district, belongs to nobody. It's controlled by the municipality, and they can consume the beverages there. They can't take them out of the social district, like to say, go home or go to their car, go down the street. They can't go into another bar. As to whether they can go into another business that doesn't have a liquor license, I guess that'd be up to the local police. But you will see some of those. The social districts are supposed to be very well marked. They're supposed to advise people where the boundaries are. And people are supposed to literally just consume food and beverages within those areas that they buy from local retailers. There's a lot of confusion about those two laws. Some people are mixing them up, the cocktails to go in the social districts. They are different. They each have their own set of restrictions. Don't know if anyone has any questions about those.
Is there any size?
I'm sorry?
Go ahead, Trooper McCarthy.
Are there any size restrictions on the beverages to go?
Yes, hold on. I don't have these all memorized yet. Okay.
Reason I ask is we have a couple over here in the Howell area, and it's like a liter plus they're walking out with, and the one is almost like a bag. It's big.
Well, yeah, there could be some gray area there. Qualified container has to be clean, sealable. liquid capacity that doesn't exceed a gallon and sealed to close off the container with no perforations or straw holes. That's it. So they might be creative in what kind of containers they use, would have to meet those specific restrictions.
1 gallon is quite a bit. But for those of you, the state troopers and also Barb, have you seen what if these social districts in your areas, they're popping up all over the state? I'm assuming they're probably in all of your areas that you serve, but have you seen any problems within those districts at all, or any concerns from your perspective?
If I may, I'll jump in on that. We do have a social district here in Holly, and ironically, it's in the historic Battle Alley, which got its name from, you're right, Trooper Hebner is getting a kick out of that. That is our social district. But in the process of that, I did quite a bit of research, because not only am I the police chief here in Holly, but I'm also a council president pro tem for Lake Orion as elected council member there. So Lake Orion did that. So in the process down there, I was doing a lot of the research, and I was actually calling different social districts around the state to see what their perceived problems were going to be. Of course, this was legislation born out of the pandemic impact on bars and restaurants. So Michigan Economic Development looked at these as something that could revitalize those industries. And so what we did in Holly is we, the pieces of that are very important is the signage, the labels on the cups, the involved organizations. I met with those. Here's kind of the rules and restrictions. And then of course the enforcement, because once that cup leaves that retailer, it's no longer there, no longer under the auspices of the MLCC. They did their job. They sold the cup. Once it goes into the social district, it's up to those communities to police that. Now, the good news for this panel is in all of the research, or the research that I did, literally all of the communities that had active social districts going, they did not have youth drinking, because for one thing, there's an extra $1.50 added to each cup by the bars, because they have to purchase a special cup and then stickers that are made. A lot of the social districts will charge up to 50 cents per cup. The communities to maintain the social district, so the bars end up paying for that. But I did not find a lot of youth drinking. I had that concern here in Holly as well. So I did some due diligence on that, and we're not finding that in Holly as well. It's mostly the adult patrons of those bars that buy, and there are a lot of people still in the pandemic that would not go into a restaurant and have a drink. They would rather be outside. I refer to it as a restaurant bar without walls, and they feel safer in a pandemic environment being outside. But we're not finding in Holly, and I certainly didn't find a lot of youth drinking or youth access by virtue of the social district. So that's kind of a good news. Usually kids are going to get this alcohol, and they're going to stay away from public with it. They're going to hang with their friends. They're going to be at parties. They're going to be in cars. So the whole concept of being downtown with other adults and people that know you, and then trying to drink, is counterintuitive to normal juvenile behavior with alcohol. So it's not been an increasing trend for youth drinking.
I haven't been aware of any problems per se with social districts. I know that some communities have struggled because they want to have special license events, which are the temporary licenses for nonprofits. And based on the language in the law, if there's a special license that's going to be located within a social district, the people who have the social district permits cannot use them during the special license event. So you got to pick your poison, one or the other. Can't have both at the same time. That has been an issue for some communities. I know of one that was talking about amending their plan to actually make their social district a little smaller, so that they could have an area that special licensees could use on an ongoing basis that was near the social district, but not within it. I've also heard that some communities underestimated the amount of trash that was a result of having these areas. But it seems like the chief had mentioned, that if they had good plans in this local government, it seems like it's gone pretty smoothly for them.
I see we have a question here. So the cups in a social district must have both the logo of the store and the district, not just the district?
Correct.
All right, are there any more questions on this topic before we? Okay, so what have been some of the changes you have seen in the community because of participating in your coalition?
And Randy, I'm just going to add a little bit to that. So maybe because of your participation in the coalition, or since a coalition has been formed in your community? And if there isn't any changes, maybe describe like, you know, what you would hope to see, or what
I wasn't going to say changes, but, and again, I'm kind of fresh to Holly. It's been since late 2019. Of course, pandemic shuttered everything. But what I see is when you have the teen nights and the community nights is the public awareness. And I think this is important, is the public awareness of the adults and the parents, as was mentioned earlier, their buy-in to their community working together to try to stop youth substance abuse. And so it's in the social media, sometimes it's in the local newspaper. Certainly we're sharing it out on our social media, and the grown-ups of the community are actually seeing that, because that's not something they went through. When I was in school, there was no discussion of anything like this, substance abuse groups and prevention. So there's a lot of adults that are now buying into that. So what I see is more of a community acceptance for us to have those conversations and participate, and then also help us. We've gotten phone calls just recently. We had, it was interesting. We had several phone calls come to our police department that a store was selling to minors. And the officers were immediately over there. As it turns out, the store was not selling to minors. He was trying to chase them away once he found out they were trying to get patrons to buy. That happens everywhere. But it was other adults in the community that were aware of the coalition and the work they do that weren't going to tolerate that when they saw this activity going outside the store. So the more the coalition is published and working within the adult community, they become eyes and ears for law enforcement and for the goals of the community. And we're seeing that happen. So there is really good impact. You don't always get that kind of feedback from us, but we do get adult buy-in to these programs to assist our youth to prevent substance abuse.
Again, I'll completely agree with what Chief is saying. I have 5 counties in my area. And if you want to know how good a coalition is working, go to the area that doesn't have one yet. And what you find out is not only do you have the adults buying in, but then everything else comes with it. All of a sudden, they want to know in that community why they can't have what they have in the other county. Then you find out that they're not taking MiFi, so the school changes. Then you find out that they went through the MiFi process. They wrote a grant and they have a health system in their school. Then they find out that they have counselors that are paid, not only psychological counselors, but substance use counselors in their school because of this grant, because of the MiFi. All of a sudden, because of one coalition, you have other communities in neighboring counties now trying to get healthy and bring all these other things to their community too. And it's a really beautiful thing when you see communities not only embracing this, but then also seeing how much more comes with this type of lifestyle.
Yeah, Trooper McCarthy, do you have anything to add to that?
I do not.
All
Another
right.
thing I think I could add, if you give me a second, Randy, is with some of the coalitions I work with, it seems that when the businesses that serve alcohol realize that they have allies in the police department, that they can work together well, that is kind of a light bulb moment. They realize then that if they have problems, they can call the police and they may not get slapped by the police. They're going to get assistance, maybe education, maybe they'll face some sort of sanction, but it's better than what would have happened if instead they just try to solve the problems themselves or kick drunk people out and make them drive home, things like that. Seems that the businesses come up with better solutions to deal with problems because they have a good relationship with the local.
Yeah. And then how would you describe the importance of your involvement in substance use prevention coalitions?
And Randy, I'm just wondering if maybe I feel like everyone kind of described that already, unless anyone wants to add anything more to that.
Well, I'm going to drop this on my community coalition director, Ms. Pappel. It's something we did in a previous community that I'm planning on doing here. And we talked about that. Trooper Hebner and Trooper McCarthy are working with, families and youth, but working with the business owners. So what I did and what I want to do here in Holly is reach out to every licensee and have a meeting, bring them into the police department and say, hey, look, we can be an ally for you and we can assist you, but you need to work with us. And here's what we want to see you do. And here's, if you have alcohol displays that are next to doors, that's how booze is getting ripped off by underage kids. We want to work with you. And it helps by bringing those business owners and some of their managers in. And we've got a large community room within our police department building, and bring them in, sit them down and talk about what is the expectation of law enforcement, what's the expectation of the community itself on our liquor selling establishments, and what is your expectation of us? How can we assist you? And, perhaps it's just doing a walkthrough in each of the liquor stores and showing them where they're at risk by having certain displays that are in a place where they could be easily stolen from the alcohol, and then the kids get it and off they go. And trust me, and my law enforcement colleagues know this, the kids know the stores where that's available. So it's working with them, but it also kind of puts them on a spot that, we're going to go down to the police department and work with the cops on preventing underage access to alcohol. So that's a program that we're going to get going up here in Holly. And I would encourage other law enforcement, other communities to do that. It's not that hard. There isn't a lot of information. It's just calling these business owners in, the bars, the restaurants, and the party stores and the gas stations that sell, and then just having one big group meeting and have a discussion about those expectations and what we can do to help each other.
I'm on board with that. And I've been talking with our board member who's on also, and we're like, you have some great ideas that we need to bring to fruition here in Holly that we're hearing that you've experienced in North Oakland, at North Oakland. So looking forward to that. Thank you.
And not only that, make sure you include your marijuana dispensaries. Up in Sheboygan, we're trying to get that rolling. And one of the first things that they did, one of the people that wanted to join the coalition owns a dispensary. And he wanted to make sure that he was doing everything legally, but he also wanted to make sure that he was able to try to cut access to minors if they were trying to purchase. So, again, this is, you can think of the law as a ruler, or you can think of it as a curb. And a lot of times I think it's a lot better when we use the law as a curb and we try to curb behavior and make sure that we're both on the same page. And absolutely.
Yeah, and I see Angela has her hand up. If you would like to unmute.
Good afternoon, everyone. I want to commend the officers for doing, patrolling the areas and making sure that kids aren't, indulging illegally. But here in Detroit, the police officers have such, a huge task to deal with, especially on the weekends. And I don't know, I mentioned this before during the meeting, that oftentimes, especially in downtown Detroit, there's, always a lot of fights, but there's a lot of restaurants and liquor stores. Well, I should say liquor stores is what I really want to say, up and down Jefferson. So even if someone who cannot afford to go into one of those restaurants to eat, they're able to go into any liquor store up and down Jefferson and, come out with a red cup and then walk the streets, of course, drunk or whatever. And the police are charged with trying to break up fights and all that. So they don't really get a chance to become all that engaged with the retailers until they have to because a fight broke out in the restaurant or something like that. And then if anybody on the call here today, familiar with Greektown, there is a liquor store that is right in Greektown. So all you have to do is walk into that store in the heart of the major street that's in Greektown across from the casinos. And I mean, they sell any and every kind of liquor there is. So even if there is a person who is underage, they're able to have somebody who's just walking the street and say, hey, can you, I want to buy this. Can you buy this for me? And most of the time people do, because they're so overwhelmed during really starting like Thursday evenings through Sunday, and especially on days when it's really, really warm, and if they got ball games going on and concert events, downtown Detroit, they're just overwhelmed. And I think that since the recent fights have broken out, the retailers association there and the people who own the restaurants have been, a little upset about that, because now they see that because of those fights being broken out and everything, it's it's hampering their businesses, and people don't want to come in and eat or whatever because they're hanging out in front of the restaurants and things like that. So I think that here in the Detroit area, the coalitions here would have to work a little bit harder at trying to build better relationships, not only just with the retailers in restaurants, but also with the police officers, because there's just so much going on and they're overwhelmed and they really can't, focus on this because it's something else that is going on. And so, I commend you all for, getting involved and being engaged and working with young people, because at this time, it's really hard here in the city, and, with the, changing of guards and things like that, it's always something that is going on as it relates to alcohol, people driving and, drinking and driving. That's an ongoing thing every weekend. So I just think that, in terms of here in the city, we have to do better with working with law enforcement. There are, some good coalitions like Love Detroit Youth with, I think Dr. Renee Dudley spearheads that, and she does a lot with the geofencing and some other things. But I think that, we're starting, but it's a slow start.
Angela, I was going to jump in. I appreciate your comments. And that is when you have a large area and you have a lot of things going on, it's very difficult to focus. But if you have pinpoint areas, and you made a very important comment that if there's a lot of disturbances as a result of liquor sales. Now, these business owners aren't knowing that they're selling to minors because it's other adults coming in. So they're not violating the law. However, the disturbances that come from that are impacting local businesses. I would encourage you to work and make contact with your most effective community coalition to get with the local chamber of commerce or business owners association in that district and form an eyes and ears program that will work, because other businesses are being affected by the results of the underage and the consumption of alcohol. So the fights, the disturbances, it's impacting business. So it may be helpful to get your coalition to work with your chamber of commerce, your Greektown Business Owners Association, or any district where that's occurring, and get them to develop a program, because it certainly sounds like they would all benefit from that.
And I noticed that we didn't say a whole lot about parents, but I think that parents are a key component in this as well, because oftentimes, we really want to focus on, the young people, but also we need to look at the parents, because I think one of the officers said that, you have that one-on-one interaction with the kid, but then they go back to that environment where everybody is drinking and smoking weed, but we also need to work on changing the mindset of the parents as well, and getting them to see, you know, the importance of, you know, living sober free. But that becomes the challenge sometimes.
I'm gonna say amen to that.
Sasha, I'm so old. I actually remember the Blue Pigs when I worked down there. And a lot of the precincts would do community groups. And then you'd actually have a lot of the house, like when we go out Jefferson, a couple of those housing districts, they'd actually have community associations. So having, you know, trying to get the precinct community relation officers back in touch with those community associations so they can talk about the problems that they're having, because Chief is right. You want to be able to try to pinpoint where your problem areas are. So whether it's a Chamber of Commerce or, you know, a community association group, and they can try to help get city council people involved and target some of these issues and problems. You know, and all over the place, you know, in the city, I'm sure, you know, going towards Belle Isle, look at the changes that Belle Isle has went. I left there in 2000, and, you know, Belle Isle had a real rough patch for a while, and now they've tried to change things up again. So through those ebbs and flows, trying to make sure that you get people on board together and making sure that they're communicating with problems. You know, they don't know it's a problem if they don't have a meeting about it to talk about those issues.
I agree. And then I also need to say this too, because, you know, I am born and raised in the city of Detroit pretty much all my life. But, you know, sometimes the media portrays, you know, like that it is Detroiters that are causing the problems, you know, with some of those ills that we're having. But we must keep in mind that oftentimes on the weekend, there are now, you know, since some of the restrictions have been lifted, they have bus tours who bring people into the city for, you know, gambling trips or whatever. So, you know, it could be a combination of both. Some could be, you know, people who live in the city, but there is also people who don't live in the city or live outside of the city or not even in the state that, you know, when some of those, you know, drunken recordings pop up in, you know, social media and stuff like that, sometimes, you know, it's people that don't really reside in the city. But, it, you know, I know, again, going back to it, there's something, you know, that we must change, because if not, you're going to lose money anyway. And I think that it's kind of sad that, you know, people like us, we are fighting really hard to keep people safe and sober. And then, you know, our politicians go and do the things that they do. And like Barb said, you know, just learning the difference between social districts and the, what was the other one you said? I forgot.
Cocktails to
ready
go.
to go. Huh?
Yep.
So
Cocktails
it's
to go and all kinds of things.
Cocktails to go. And it's like, what are we doing all this for? It makes you angry, so to speak, when you know you're working really hard and, you know, during a pandemic, what were you guys thinking? You adding or giving them money to make, you know, law enforcement work even harder. It's just a crazy mix, I guess. But thank you for allowing me to, you know, say something.
Yeah, of course. Those are good questions. So we have another question. So Ruth was asking, so building off of what Angela is saying, how can coalitions help law enforcement officers who aren't involved in prevention shift to a further upstream approach?
Well, jumping in on that, I think that's kind of the discussion we're having. They're unique to each community, but then again, they're not. It's the same problem, just played out differently. Where the coalitions, and I think what Angela's dealing with And she said, you know, you've got different patrons coming in, people within the city, but then large volumes of people who come down for the casinos, Greektown, things like that. At the end of the day, it's still young people trying to get alcohol from businesses in that location. And the more the coalitions can work with the chambers, the business associations, perhaps it's developing a relationship with each of these bars and retail locations that says, we're going to ID, we're going to be strict about it, and we're going to let volunteers come in and you know, watch our behavior. And you know what, we're going to put a sticker on our door that says, you know, we participate with our community coalition. You know, we're in prevention of underage abuse, and they earned that by that communication and having that relationship. Those are some things, and a lot of times it's just being present. Like Angela said, I mean, if you've got that many businesses down there, and if somebody from a coalition or a local business organization comes in and says, hey, we've got problems with underage youth and it's drinking, and it's causing disturbances and it's affecting business, how can we work together? And if that visit to every one of those establishments is from somebody from the coalition, from the local business associations, whether it's the chamber or a regional business association or one of the precincts, that's a really powerful message that I think will stay. They can meet with the owner of the business or the management of the business and just pop in and have that conversation, developing those relationships, and then having the chambers assist law enforcement by being able to participate in those meetings. I'm sure Susan would be more than happy to join us as we meet with our establishment owners here in Holly. And again, it's that relationship and partnership and then we talk about that to our community to get the adult and the parent buy-in. Is here's what we're doing to try to prevent underage drinking, and here's how you can help us. I think that's like the self-licking ice cream cone, if you will, if we can get that going.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm gonna hand it over to Nicole to finish us up.
Okay, all right. So Barb, we actually had a couple specific questions for you, and one of them was, are there ways that prevention coalitions can be more involved or support the work that you do?
I think there are lots of ways. As hopefully all of you know, we do make information available on our website. For example, we have licensee lists. Hopefully that's something that you can utilize in your own community, doing compliance checks with police or other sorts of initiative, mystery shoppers, cops in shops, whatever sorts of things you might be able to utilize in your community. You can notify us of problem locations, and we can literally check them. Sometimes the police are known to businesses in the community, and sometimes they need an independent agency that isn't known to check. So we can do that, especially in smaller towns, things like that. Gosh, I'm running dry of any other solutions. I don't know if any of the police officers can jump in here. Also, another tool you have in your box of tools is we have semi-annual meetings with the commission. We used to do those in person. The last year or two, we've had them virtual and things like that. I don't know if we'll resume them in person, but you're always welcome to attend those. If you have comments for the commission, you can make them. Mike has appeared regularly at some of those meetings, and some of the other coalition representatives have. Sometimes they have comments about particular applications in the community that are problematic or of concern. Sometimes they have general suggestions about law changes or not making law changes. Your voice can be heard to the commission. They may not take every suggestion, but you're always welcome to come in and make them or to present information or ideas. Those are some things I can think of. Like I said, if anyone else has any suggestions to add to that, I'd appreciate it as well.
Well, we do have someone who asked a question. The question is, when a retailer is hit with a violation, why are the fines so low?
Well, our fines are actually part of the law. So that is created by the legislature, not by our agency. That tends to be the case in my experience with state agencies, that the law and fines are dictated in the laws, not the rules that the agency creates. There's been a lot of talk over many years in my experience about raising fines. And sometimes that argument doesn't go well because The question is, why aren't maximum fines assessed more often? If it helps, our system tends to be progressive. So say, for example, if a store sells to a minor, the first time that happens, we're likely to just hypothetically give them a fine of, say, $200, $300, $400, something like that. The second time, if they do it again, especially in a short duration of time, they're likely to get a stiffer fine. And as this goes on, they're more likely to get suspensions. There is a restriction in our law that if they have a certain number of sales within a 2-year period, the commission has to suspend or revoke the license for at least a period of time. So those are things that can happen that can impact that licensee. But they don't always get slammed the first time. So yeah, to a business that's a big nightclub, a $300 fine is probably almost nothing. We get that. Suspensions are much more dramatic for a business. They can be open, but any alcohol or allow any consumption. That hits them pretty hard. And some businesses have gotten long suspensions, but that doesn't always happen. I don't know if there's any sort of initiative for the legislature to increase fines. They tend to not be dedicated that way. They tend to be more business friendly, at least in the last several years. And the industries that support the alcohol businesses tend to resist fines and increases in fees, for example. So every time we talk about increasing fees, they go crazy and start calling representatives in the governor's office and whoever else. So raising fines and fees is not a popular topic to the business community or to our legislators oftentimes. That doesn't mean it can't happen. We don't tend to particularly lobby for law changes ourselves. Don't know if that's something community coalitions literally could spearhead as a focus, seeing if there could be changes in the laws.
So
Might be a tough battle, but again, doesn't mean it's impossible.
In a real quick aside to that, and I appreciate that from a local law enforcement administrator perspective. Police chiefs and sheriffs and directors in their municipalities keep track of their licensed liquor establishments. And what we find and track is those who repeatedly violate. So we're going to know who the problem children are in our block. And the fine might not be bad, but if you stack up 3 or 4 or 5 violations in a certain period of time, and Barb mentioned that there's suspensions, but there's also the ability of local control. We've lost that over the last 20 years. There was more, it used to be when a Class C liquor license was being transferred, local law enforcement get involved with that. But because there was money, charges to have that done, it was legislated away. But what we can do is it's March or April when all of these licenses are being renewed. What we can do in law enforcement is we can send a letter along with our respective councils, boards, or commissions, not recommending approval of a license if we have a repeated pattern of violations at a bar license. And that is more important, I think, than a fine to a business that makes a lot of money and they pay a $1,000 fine. It doesn't bother them. But to have those constant letters and recommendations made back to the Liquor Control Commission from local municipal leaders that this bar is not following the law. We've got all of these violations and we recommend closure. In my lifetime in law enforcement, I've participated in 2 of those where those licensees were shut down. And that was more important than the fine, was tracking those violations and then doing something about it. And every community can do that. And every, I think, coalition can make sure and work with their local law enforcement leaders to make sure that that's done. If they have a problem child, that community needs to communicate back to the Liquor Control Commission and keep them on the radar.
Hey, thanks.
I should probably add to that. Thank you, Chief. I should add real quickly, if I could, that there are 2 processes local governments can request: to not have a license renewed and to have a license revoked. Both processes require a due process element where you're going to have to do notices to the business, have public hearings. With the non-renewal, you're going to have to do that at a certain time of year to block the renewal. If you have questions about those processes or what you're required to do, let me know. Those need to be initiated at the local governmental level. So thank you.
Thanks a lot, you guys. We're on a bit over time, but a real last quick question. If you have any quick tips, any of you, Again, I think having law enforcement is a staple of a coalition. If there are folks out there right now who don't really have a good relationship with their law enforcement, or maybe they just don't have a relationship at all, but do you have any tips on how these local coalition leaders could engage their law enforcement to be a part of their coalition? If nothing comes to mind, that's okay too, but just curious. I know we're on overtime, but any quick suggestions on how people might engage their law enforcement to be part of their coalition?
Do something as simple as a meeting, take a picture and blast it on social media and even in your local newspaper. And it's amazing when you do have people showing up from law enforcement, when there's pressure put on other law enforcement partners, why they're not there. Especially if you have that meeting with your local representative as well. And all of a sudden you have the representative there, but you don't have your chief of police or sheriff or your local state police post. They're going to wonder why each other isn't there. And it's a way to not necessarily call somebody out. It's not a negative phone call, but all of a sudden it's a positive thing, but all of a sudden somebody's not there and not getting recognized. And it's a subtle way to get people to come to the table.
And again, I don't think law enforcement necessarily has to attend all the meetings. They'd certainly be welcome, but I hope they can pick up the phone when a coalition leader calls. But Chief Norsch, do you have something to add quickly?
I think Trooper Hebner hit it on the nail. The question is, how do we get law enforcement agencies to partner with coalitions that aren't already? And that for a guy that doesn't know social media, you sure nailed it. And that's how you do it. You take the picture, you post it up, you share it out, and everybody sees it. And other neighboring agencies, and what's going to happen is one of their commissions or boards are going to say, hey, chief. and usually that's how it gets going. So it's you start the fire and it spreads. Community coalition members need to contact their local law enforcement agency and invite them and have that meeting. And then they take the initiative to take those photographs and get those posted and shared, and it'll cascade from there.
Well, thank you all very much. We really appreciate it. Trooper McCarthy, you want to add to that?
Nope, I was just giving my thumbs up to it too. Exactly what they said.
All right. Well, thank you very much. We really appreciate your involvement in your local coalitions and helping us out on our panel today. We are going to transition to our last session. So we're going to move folks to the waiting room, and then we will have our last session with Teresa Sander from 3:30 to 4:30. So stay tuned. We'll see you back in just a few minutes.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yep. See you guys.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Norsch.
Thank you.
And I saw.
Mike, we don't have to sign off, do we?
No, we're just gonna stay in the waiting room for just a second while I get set up.
Okay.
Just sit tight. We'll let you back in just a few
You might
minutes.
want to stop recording, Mike.
Okay.
Thanks, Sarah. Reminder too. Yes.